5 seconds to go. Start. This court, in effect, held that for determining whether the plaintiff was ready and willing to perform his part of the agreement, it is necessary for the court to consider the conduct of the plaintiff prior and subsequent to filing the suit for specific performance. Stop. The relevant part of the judgment is extracted herein below. Para. Section 16C of the Act envisages that plaintiff must plead and prove that he had performed or has always been ready and willing to perform the essential terms of the contract which are to be performed by him, other than those terms the performance of which has been prevented or waived by the defendant. Stop. The continuous readiness and willingness on the part of the plaintiff is a condition precedent to grant the relief of specific performance. Stop. This circumstance is material and relevant and is required to be considered by the court while granting or refusing to grant the relief. Stop. Para. This court held that a finding as to whether the plaintiffs were all along and still ready and willing to perform their part of the contract, was a mandatory requirement under section 16C of the Specific Relief Act. Stop. The court would necessarily have to arrive at the finding that the plaintiff all along were, and still are ready and also willing to perform their part of the contract, taking into account the entirety of the pleadings as also the evidence brought on record. Stop. To quote this court, para, so far there being a plea that they were ready and willing to perform their part of the contract is there in the pleading, we have no hesitation to conclude, that this by itself is not sufficient to hold that the appellants were ready and willing in terms of section 16C of the Specific Relief Act. This requires not only such plea but also proof of the same. Stop. Now examining the first of the two circumstances, how could mere filing of this suit, after exemption was granted be a circumstance about willingness or readiness of the plaintiff? Stop. This at the most could be the desire of the plaintiff to have this property. Stop. It may be for such a desire this suit was filed raising such a plea. Stop. But section 16C of the said act makes it clear that mere plea is not sufficient, it has to be proved. Stop. Para. Justice B.P. Jeevan Reddy said that grant of the relief of specific performance is discretionary and the court is not bound to grant it. Stop. This court further held that though time is not of essence to a contract relating to transfer of property, such contracts need to be completed within a reasonable time period. Stop. Thus, the time element cannot be completely ignored. Stop. Para. In a suit for specific performance of a contract, the court is required to pose unto itself the following questions, namely, whether there is a valid agreement of sale binding on both the vendor and the vendee, and whether the plaintiff has all along been and still is ready and willing to perform his part of the contract as envisaged under section 16C of the Specific Relief Act, 1963. Stop.